nodded because I didn't want to look like an idiot. I eventually gave Paul a quizzical look. Glass jaw. A guy who can't take a punch, he said. Usually a guy who looks like a badass. Apparently the Hulk was considered somewhat of a pathetic figure around this gym. A scary-looking guy who it would be unwise to tangle with in most circumstances, but who wasn't very gifted at what I was rapidly learning was a narrow discipline. The stock boy, on the other hand, who was nothing to look at, was well regarded in local boxing circles despite not having impressed me. Until he did. The Hulk climbed out of the ring, dazed. I have a vague memory of hearing later about him having his jaw wired shut in order to heal. The concept of having wires in one's jaw was disturbing to me, but also exotic. It was one of those things that happened to a character in a Warner Brothers cartoon, along with falling off cliffs or having anvils dropped on their heads. I had been training on my own, which meant shadow boxing in front of my basement mirror, lifting weights, and hitting a makeshift heavy bag that I had crafted out of a duffel bag. I had grown impressed with my own abilities, and had the kind of thought that teenagers with little life experience had. Wait till the world gets a load of me. After the Hulk went down, I climbed into the ring with Paul. My next memory was of being on my back staring up at a skylight while Tweety Bird did the can-can around my head. Paul's concerned face hovered above me. He said, "You okay?" Recognizing that I had failed to differentiate between sparring with a mirror, which didn't hit back, and fighting a Golden Gloves champion, who did, I ended my boxing career 0-1. My lesson of the day? You never know who's a real tough guy until after the fight. I had assumed, based upon my general athleticism and untested performance, that I would either not get punched or be able to absorb one. It was the kind of foolishness one might expect from a teenager who had seen too much of one movie, but the lesson had been learned, and the term glass jaw has stingingly stuck with me. A guy who can't take a punch. Usually a guy who looks like a badass. I hadn't thought very much about the term glass jaw until about 20 years later. A client and friend named Harry, the communications troubleshooter at one of the largest chemical companies in the world, told me that he knew it was time to retire when his new boss alerted him to a chemical spill and said, "Get up here, Harry. We have a PR problem." Harry's point was that when he was coming up in the business in the 1950s and 1960s, chemical spills were considered complex incidents, of which the public relations function was just one component. You cleaned up the mess, compensated the community, alerted appropriate authorities, and put in new safeguards to prevent future such incidents. The curative process was long and painful, involving multiple disciplines, plenty of missteps, backtracking, and improvisation. But make it look good? Or convince people not to be outraged? These were the things Harry's boss was now expecting of him. In the 1990s, as cable news and the internet were expanding, hostile coverage of corporate and political messes was becoming uncontrollable. But there was an expectation that the PR department could reach into a mythical bag of tricks and put a shine on a pigsty. Harry shrugged and said, "Who the hell would believe that one of the biggest industrial companies on the planet couldn't take a punch?" I didn't answer Harry's rhetorical question at the time, but will now. Like the Hulk whose downfall was so seared into my memory, powerful people and entities themselves are oblivious to the bogeys creeping around the ring and overestimate their skills to battle them. I have grown accustomed to the snickers of the unblemished who mistake their current fortunes for superior life management. The truth is that nobody who gets cold-cocked believes they provoked or deserved it. Glassjaw is about the changing nature of controversy. The thesis of this audiobook is that individuals and organizations that were once thought to be indestructible are, in fact, uniquely fragile in the face of reputational attacks from conventionally